sit still, just like a photograph. You made me feel like this will last forever. Looking in your eyes, I see my whole life. Oh,
hey, chat.
they say you know it, but you know it. I don't know.
What's up?
Promise that you hold me close, don't let me go. Take my heart, don't break it. Don't break it.
Sounds clear, is it not?
Love me to my bones. All this time I wasted. You were out there all alone. You and I started intertwining souls. We were never strangers. You were right there all alone. I lose my mind when I'm around you. How I cool my mind. When I'm without you, I don't feel so low. I wanna give you all I've got. Oh, they say you know it, they know it, I don't know. Oh, promise that you hold me close, don't let me go. Take my heart, don't break it. Love me to my heart. All this time I wasted. You were right there all along. You and I started intertwining souls. We were never strangers. You were right there all along. Take my heart, don't break it. Love me to my bones. All this time I wasted. You were right there all along.
Thank you. Please clear that out.
Love it when your eyes see that little wall. As you realize I wanted you. Falling out of love was inevitable. So darling, I don't need the truth. The silence is a work of art, but your body is a masterpiece. If you're gonna break my heart, do it as a fantasy. I don't need to know if I'm the only one taking you home. Just need you on me when the lights are low. Don't need reminding, but when the sun is up, you move on to other love. Forget about us. The way you tell me that I'm in deep though, when I catch you with your hands they red. How stupid do you think I could be, my darling? I can see
Oh, I
what's
know.
in
Jesus
your
and I are tight.
The silence is a work of art, but your body is a masterpiece. If you're gonna break my heart, do it as a fantasy. If I'm the only one taking you home, just need you on me when the lights are low. Don't need reminding, but when the sun is up, you move on to other love. Forget about us. I never met you, but I wanted to invite you to the party.
I like this one.
You walked in with those green eyes, never stolen by nobody. And they flicker to the future for a moment I could picture. And you touch me, and I come back. And we're talking on the staircase about your big dreams on the big screens. Out of Georgia now, you're lonely in this city. Lie with me, and you're scared it's moving quickly. Oh, now you're crying, you're a pieces. Cause the only love remember now it's Jesus. Like a minute, oh, I hate that I'm the reason that you're in your head right now. While your world is spinning low. So slow it down, take a moment now. We're too young to drown. Deep in the water, full of hope is down. Let me pull you down. Let me hold you down. Let me slow it down. Ain't it funny how it changes, how the future rearranges? I get nervous, how it makes you. Maybe loving you is dangerous. I could lose you like the others. Only God is there. Let me reach your love. Oh, love. And I know you probably hate it, but I'm in my heart. So slow it down. Take a moment now. It's young. Deep in dirty water. Hold the start. Let me pull you out. Let me hold you. Let me slow it down. Slow it down. When you're on the ground and you're crying, I'm telling to slow it down. When you're spinning round in your head. I'll help you slow it down. Another night I got you slipping through my fingers. You're right in front of me, but I don't think I'm with you. Don't be afraid to go ahead and pull the trigger. You take my hand and take me down into the dark. I let you grab me, put the venom in my armor. I can't believe you pulled me in to watch my heart die. In my love. The more I try to run away, the more you make me stay. I know I've been holding on for way too long. You could drive me crazy till the brakes fall off, but I kinda love it when you play my love, play my love. I know I've been holding on for way too long. You could drive me crazy till the brakes fall off, but I kinda love it when you play my love, play my love. One more time to do a different dance floor. You and I, the waste the only chance. No, I'm not gonna ruin those plans. Okay, alright, we had it all night. Oh, I try to run away. The more you make me stay. I know I've been holding way too long. You could drive me crazy till the brakes fall off, but I kinda love it when you play my love, play my love. I know I've been holding on for way too long. You could drive me crazy till the brakes fall off, but I kinda love it when you play my love, play my love.
I'm bringing up my things on yet.
I
I have it ready to go.
way too long. You can drive me crazy till the brakes fall off. I gotta love it when you play my love, play my love. Tell me, I know I've been holding on for way too long. You can drive me lipstick, message on my bathroom mirror. Said by the time you leave this, I'll be West Coast bound. I'm cooked, I guess you couldn't get any clear. You know, it's nothing but the weight on your shoulders that was holding me down. She let me on tricks on this side of town. Still right here, put me on the ground. When we run out, like is it fun? Is it pain? Or is it an angel taking my heart away? Because the second I know what I'm playing, she's gone, she's gone, she's gone. Will she ever hear? Will she ever mind? She's shooting so burning up inside. She's gone, she's gone, she's gone, she's gone. Oh, I discovered the boom cover each other. Woke up alone in these covers. I guess I'm just another sucker. I went to sleep. She left the key. Took everything except for me. She left no trace of this side of town. No goodbye kiss. No sit around. I'm still right here. Don't be on the ground. Is it a boy? Is it a play? Or is it an angel taking my heart away? Because the second I know what I want. She's gone, she's gone, she's gone. She never cared, she never wanted. She just shooting so burning up inside. She's gone, she's gone, she's gone, she's gone. Is it a plane or is it an angel taking my heart away? Because the second I know what I wanted, she's gone, she's gone, she's gone. She never cared. You've been the one that he runs to when he's got nobody else. Holding him up even when you feel like you're taking yourself. And you say, change me. Already been through this tears on my shoulder to prove it, and it breaks me. You can't see, they'll only keep letting you down. If you don't know what he's got now, he never will. If you don't know what he wants now, he won't until it's too late. So don't wait for somebody, if you're right with somebody, if you don't know what he's got now, just let him go. Hold on, it's not his way, he's all alone, it's too late. You don't need to try, if you don't treat you right by now, he never will. Can't even put in the effort or make up a better excuse. Said I'll be there for you, be there for you whenever. Guess he found something better to do. But you say he's gonna change me. Already the tears on my shoulder to prove it, and it breaks me. You can't see, I only keep letting it down. Oh, you don't know what he's got now, he never will. You don't know what he wants now, he won't until it's too late. Don't wait for somebody, if you're right with somebody, let him down. You don't know what he's got now, let him go. You know what he's done, it's when he's all alone, it's too late. You don't need to try, if you don't treat you right by now, you never will. When you're driving home at night, does he give you butterflies? Does he take the long way just so you don't have to say goodbye? Wasting another thought. Does it make you feel like God? Everything he's ever wanted gives you to the lips of soul. If you don't know what he's got now, you never will. If you don't know what he wants now, you won't until it's too late. Somebody, somebody. If you don't know what he's got now, let him go. But all you know is he's always fighting. He's always on his way. If he don't treat you right now, he never will.
I like this song.
Please, please forgive all my sins. So all that is take this love. Please, just throw me up on the sheets. Tell me it's really good. Something right over me. I started to be easy to get you out of my mind. I think I found a new addiction. Baby, run for your life.
It's Run Run by Dutch Melrose. Baby, run for your life. Hello, how are you?
Don't ask for help, you won't let me in. Been there before, been there before. Hoping to come, but not alone anymore. Another sleepless night. We drifted into oblivion. Maybe we don't wake up from this nightmare. Pray on another breakdown. Baby, I love you when it breaks down on me. Just so that I'm already underwater. In the water, it's nothing new. Just breaks down. Baby, I love you when it breaks down. Maybe I'm running with it. Making the same mistakes. I know sometimes when we regret. We've been here before, been here before. I know it feels like love, wishing for something more. Another sleepless night. We drifted into oblivion. Maybe we don't wake up from this nightmare.
may. Well, no. I understand that. That's funny. Not our funny. How's the audio? So funny. I'll do some Reiki also, but I've got a reading to do. I don't know if I've heard this song before. All of your devotion, just another smoke screen, gave you what I had to give. I like digging holes and hiding things inside them. When I go down, I won't forget to find them. 'Cause I've got memories and travel like gypsies in the night. I build a home and wait for someone to tear it down. Then pack it up in boxes, head for the next town. 'Cause I've got memories and travel like gypsies in the night. And 1,000 times I've seen this road, 1,000 times. I've got no roots, but my home was never on the ground. I've got no roots, but my home was never on the ground. I've got no roots. But my home was never on the ground. I've got no roots, but my home was never on the ground. I've got no roots. I've got no roots. I like standing still, but that's just foolish. That's right, Dan. Danny. I'll say a different land, but I've got memories and travel like gypsies in the night. I got names and numbers and play to get to name. It's just the place that changes, the rest is still the same. I got memories, travel like gypsies in the night. Okay, just to be clear, there was just I felt it, a heart chakra attack, and then it shifted up to the third eye. They're upset. They don't want me to. No, reverse. I do not consent to that. I rebuke you. Return to sender.
You ever get that feel that you got shit the type that sticks around like
I don't care about anyone not liking me. You bitches barely like yourselves. No cap. Also, here's a preview to my next set. I don't know if you can see that. They're a little
no idea that you're in me. That's about you nearly every night this week. How many secrets can it be? There's this tune I found that makes me think of you somehow. When I lay it on repeat till I fall asleep. Feeling tricks on my senses.
I was just asking, what does my collective need to know, and what can they do to just like avoid toxic energies or people like that? What's at the bottom is avoid toxic people. Yeah, no, absolutely not. Rediscover yourself. What are your interests? Are you hiding yourself to please others' versions of you? Or in combat with those people? No. They want attention. Create a routine of your dream. Yeah, so work on creating a healthy routine where they're blocked out more consistently and really focus on yourself more, your goals, your dreams, your self-care. 30-day challenges, right? Focus on trying to streamline your focus into yourself and your goals, like whatever energy or as much energy as you can that used to be put towards other things and people, or like whatever situations it was, people trying to be combative. Try to focus more, of course, handle what you need to, but try to focus more on building the new than fighting the old. They're fighting themselves, really. Fuck being nice, though. If you need to stand up for yourself, do so. Validate your past and open up. Yeah, don't be afraid. Because a lot of these people don't want the truth to be spoken, or the reality of what they've done to people or how they've treated people to come out, but it's coming out. So let us come out. Yeah, but they're obsessed. Don't worry about it. Have faith. You will not have to deal with this work for much longer. I hear. I love your journey. Just focus on that instead. Anything else? Right. These are self-conscious people. And they were jealous and envious of whoever they were trying to target. A lot of the times these people would try to trash talk whoever they were jealous of and then copy the same things they were jealous of, because they were trying to destroy the self-perceived competition. But then they thought there was something valuable in that person, though, so they tried to become that. I outdo the doer. Right. Social media detox. Ask your angels. Spend more time. Spend more time with spirit, and less on the drama that people are trying to create. Right? They're miserable. They're trying to suck the joy and the beauty and the peace out of your life because they don't have any of their own. So focus on improving yourself. This could be just like taking care of your own physical environment as well. Just like basic day-to-day self-care. And social media detox came out as well. Take a little break. So, divine feminine. Success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. No is a complete sentence, and I don't care about anyone not liking me. You bitches barely like yourselves. In fact, a lot of the time, they don't. That's why they try to copy someone else. Yeah, it was a cat, kitty cat. Divine masculine, your smile lights up my world, filling it with warmth. So it seems like this is how he's feeling. What about divine feminine, maybe? This is just his stack, so take what messages resonate. Don't force your story to fit. My determination and courage make my wife proud and secure. This could be a future energy too. Like, it doesn't have to be somebody that's currently married. Could be for some, but this could be a masculine, like being the person, becoming the man, or being the man that is going to be the best husband when he is married. It's like manifesting this healthy connection by being that version who's ready for that, who will honor that, be loyal to that, devoted. I will strive to avoid arguments and instead resolve issues through mature communication. Today is a new day with unlimited possibilities. This could be like people in his environment just trying to pick fights also. Today is a new day with unlimited possibilities. I am the hero of my children, setting an example for them. This also doesn't have to be a divine masculine who has children. This could be one that either is to have children with his counterpart, or it could be that she has children or a child. Today I'll say yes to opportunities that come my way. Passion flows within me, igniting my drive and guiding me towards boundless success and fulfillment. I am forever grateful for your support. He's looking up to the divine, it looks like. So this could be like he's grateful for divine feminine and the connection of the support he has with her, through her, but also because of the divine, because I feel like he has that within himself as well. But they also share that together. They have that same connection individually, which is a point that they cross over on. Or they have parallels on, or they have similarities too. Balance, I see something about balance. Alright. Let's do this one. What do you mean, the gems, the way they cross over? That's what you're talking about? I can't see. I don't know what you mean. Business partner just came out. Healthy habits and new adventures. This could be like working out and eating well together also. But there's something about also doing business or being good business partners. Yeah. So there's a message about not wasting time on toxic people or connections because it's taking time away from the future that you could have. Like the longer you stay in toxic connections, the less lifespan you'll have left to spend with a true balanced partner, and that includes whatever time it takes to get to that point and process. But like staying in a toxic connection is not going to help you. It's going to waste more years of your life before you get to what's meant for you, instead of fighting for what you could be aligning with instead. Yep. Kitty, kitty. What are you doing? Let's do this one. Okay. Right, okay. So there's been a whistleblower investigation or unforeseen events that will bring hidden truths into public awareness. Whistleblower, hello. This is the breaking point where denial collapses under the weight of evidence. The power struggles on Earth may only be a reflection of the greater conflicts playing out across the galaxy. As above, so below, and our leaders might not be the highest in command. So, like, there are people on Earth who try to position themselves, they're abusing whatever positions of power they have or they claim to have, but they try to prop themselves up or claim to have some kind of power over other people. Typically speaking, they're abusing their authority and their power. Don't do that. Don't do that. Always making mistakes. It's energy projection. So they're fine. They've been attended to and they've been fed. But remember, I just said there was a heart chakra attack, like somebody was being nasty, just like hateful. And then I picked it up here, and it was either like third eye, they were angry that I could see what was going on and pick up what was going on, and they were just sending evil eye, or they were actually sending spell work to try to block the crown and third eye. Corruption exposed, galactic politics. This is also like the spiritual attacks being exposed. But on the flip side, a lot of these people holding beef and grudges on Earth are just being used by imagine like warring alien energies, or angels and demons, spiritually speaking, the battles that have gone through history, and it being played out on the human plane, like a physical matrix variation. And then there's the past life tie. Like some of these people are just repeating past life cycles where they're still angry and trying to fight people that they were fighting in other lives. In some cases, in legitimate wars and battles, like they were on opposite side of a battlefield in some kind of kingdom war, territory war. But then also, unnecessary. Hello. Much love. Some of these people, it's like either they're possessed also, or they've like given themselves up, or like worshipped certain deities, or sacrificed themselves to certain things. Hello. Like tied themselves contractually, and they're just playing it out. But I've said this. What is your problem? Leave him alone. Okay, sure. They've been fine all day. Like the second I'm here, it's because we have karmics watching. I know, and they're sending nasty energy. No, you can get out. Return to sender. That's going to suck for you. Why are you so jealous? It's jealous energy. Just very hateful and jealous. It's Horus and Anubis. Cleansing the energy and doing some Reiki too. Over here. So, I said this before. I said this years ago. Before. Yeah, it's kind of hard to burn when they're. Like, I guess you can, but it gets very brittle and the leaves break apart, so I prefer to keep it together. They start to crumble apart when you get towards the end because there's just not enough wrapping around it. It gets too short, and you have to burn it in little chunks at that point, which again gets a little bit tricky. It can, but I don't. Just do whatever works for you, I guess. As long as you're careful. Like war zones overseas, sometimes you'll see them repeat over history. Like the same different countries will start battling again, and in some cases, it seems like it's either they're just different conflicts in the same area, but it's not. It's just the same energy recycling over again. either the same people reincarnated back and are just again like picking up on the same battle in the same place from a previous incarnation that they just didn't learn a lesson or they didn't put down, or I like to. And then when it gets down a little bit, like probably about here actually, I will take. Is it ready to come out? Maybe not. I don't know if it's ready yet. It's ready. Yeah, it's ready. I'll take this. See how crumbly that is? Like that, it all will kind of fall apart in little tiny pieces like that, and that's kind of hard to burn. So I will take it like halfway and then just retie it as best you can. You don't have to do it too tight, just enough so it holds. Remember that sometimes the thread can be a little bit more brittle at that point if it's been singed at all. So just be mindful, but it's fine. Now that'll hold a little bit longer. Before it crumbles. And I still use it when it gets small, it's just harder. So yeah, basically, let's just repeat cycles. Same energy. They're picking up on the same energy from a cycle, like a spiritual imprint, or they're reliving it, or it's an actual past life they're just reliving as well. I was picking up like the desert war zones, right? Overseas, Iraq and Afghanistan, like in the desert, water shortage came out. Water shortage again. Alright, this. Let's do what gifts and strengths should the masculine, the divine masculine collective focus on this week? Missionary. Religious mission to promote faith or services such as education, literacy, social justice, healthcare, economic development in different countries. The urge to overcome difficulties through effort, reality, contraction, and it says effort twice. Contractions could be contracts. Business partners did come out. Emotional empath, highly sensitive individuals who have a keen ability to sense what people around them are thinking and feeling. Let's do one more. Star seeds. Advanced spiritual beings who possess spiritual and scientific knowledge that date back hundreds of thousands of years. Divine feminine, please. The use, the exercise of, or invocation of supernatural powers. Manifestation too. Humanity, hospitality, self-reflections to do healing, shadow work. Special ability God gives to some to provide an open home and warm welcome to those in need. Or those are called to. Initiative to help people all over the world and see where individuals, communities, and governments need to change in order to establish a peaceful new world. It's part of the whistleblowing. The urge to be sociable and express affections, harmony, value, beauty. Destiny. Told you. Manifestation. Manifesting and aligning with destiny. Listening to the moon cycles as well. It's leading to a higher elevation. Possibly levels of abundance too, because this could be just a spiritual frequency. Grace, like untouchable, priceless. Dragon. So, how's my audio? I don't know. Abnormally quiet. I can have it down. Okay, then let's do something else. Tinny, gotcha. Thank you. Appreciate that. No sense. Some true crimes and stuff. This is Daniel Kirsty. Let's go hang out.
We're all doing well. So for today's case, we are talking about a YouTuber that truly did the unthinkable.
All YouTube viewers and random subscribers, yes, it's true, I'm selling it all.
And this was a YouTuber named Stephen McCullough. He went by the name Saxon07. He had hundreds and hundreds of videos on YouTube.
1,000 subscribers video, which is absolutely so insane.
He was particularly focused on the nerd culture niche. You could find a ton of Star Wars videos on his channel, Ghostbusters, Marvel, Doctor Who, Robot Wars. You get the idea.
Yeah, it's just a sonic screwdriver. I'll tell you what, it's very, very good at disabling emotional inhibitors.
But then in late 2022, Stephen went live on YouTube, but this live stream was not what it seemed. Because you can see Stephen sat there live streaming. He's playing Grand Theft Auto, having a great time.
Are you serious?
But like I said, this live stream was not what it seemed. Something far more sinister was actually going on.
If I say you I'll do it again! I'll kill you!
Because whilst Stephen was live streaming, a horrific murder was taking place. And this murder was incredibly violent, cold, and calculated. But Stephen, he was live streaming, so how could he be involved? And that is what we are going to be talking about today, so let's jump in. And I just want to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, and that is ExpressVPN. And do you know how much content?
I don't know if I've heard this one before, but I think it was like a pre-recorded video that he made, and he was like playing it through a live stream somehow to try to make it look like he was live during the time that he was actually out murdering her, because he was trying to give himself an alibi through doing this.
Northern Ireland, where he lived with his parents. And from what we know about Stephen's childhood, it was pretty normal. He wasn't someone that stood out in any particular way. But what was clear from a very young age is that Stephen was a little bit of a nerd. That is how people around him described him, which there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. He loved Doctor Who, Ghostbusters, Star Wars, Robot Wars. He loved gaming. He loved any kind of gadget. And he especially loved collecting things. As a kid, he would love to build and make his own toys. He also loved dressing up. He loved cosplay. And at school, Stephen was described as a little bit of a loner. He didn't have many friends, but this is something that didn't really bother Stephen. He liked being in his own little world, and he was happy with who he was. And then after finishing school, Stephen went on to university to study media studies. And as part of his studies at university, he had to create a short film. And you can actually find this short film still on YouTube. And knowing what happens later on in this case, this short film that he created is so chilling. And it's so concerning. Like, I just don't understand why he created this short film. Like, the concept, the plot of this short film, I just don't understand it. Because in the short film, Stephen plays a character called Ray. And he displays some very bad acting, by the way. Stephen can't act. And he has this ridiculous accent. It's just terrible.
Janine, what can I do for you at this late hour?
And in the short film, he invites a woman to his apartment, and he tells this woman that he will give this woman drugs if she has sex with him.
Sorry, no
cash, no hash.
They go on to have sex. The woman says, "Can I have my drugs?" And Stephen says no.
Yellow, I don't have any. Looks like you're out of luck.
He then chases this woman out of the apartment with a baseball bat.
Simple thing that I learned long time ago. Little girls can't talk.
He spends the rest of the short film hunting down this woman before shouting, "If I see you around here again, I'm going to kill you."
Dad, if I see you around here again, I'll kill you.
And I'm just like, what the actual how? This was the plot for Stephen's short film for his media studies at university, and I am sorry, if I was the lecturer and he turned that short film into me and I had to like look at it and grade it or whatever, I would be very concerned, because there is a plethora of things that you could create a short film about. Why the hell is he creating a film about bribing a woman with drugs to have sex with him, but then chasing her out of the apartment, threatening to kill her? Like, sorry, no. It's crazy. It's crazy, but it's foreshadowing. It really is with what goes on to happen. It's like the warning signs were already there. But something else actually does happen when Stephen's at university that is very significant, and that is that he creates his own YouTube channel. Now, this was in 2010, so we are talking very early days really on YouTube. YouTube had only been around for about 5 years, but people weren't using YouTube the way they use YouTube today. Being a YouTuber wasn't a career. You couldn't make money from being a YouTuber. People...
I've seen a number of cases like this where these criminals will write like murder mystery books or stories or something like that. Hello, how are you? But they'll be based on real things, like things that they did. Didn't David also, the rapper, didn't he just get in trouble for that? Like he was making songs about murdering people and then he got caught murdering that girl. Goodness gracious. We see it all the time. Or they, if it's not that they're writing stories of like, it's almost like writing out their fantasy before they go do it in the form of some kind of like murder mystery novel. They read other people's stories or they read, you know, murder stories, whatever it is, and then they go and try to act them out like a copycat. But either way, we've seen stories like that. Seems to be a common theme.
Just making videos for the fun of it and uploading it to the internet for anyone to see. It was like a hobby. And Stephen created his YouTube channel. His username was VoteSaxon07, which is apparently a Doctor Who reference. Don't quote me on that because I don't know a lot about Doctor Who. But Stephen uploads his first video on YouTube and it's about Doctor Who. He reviews a Doctor Who toy. And you can still find this video online, but it's not the best quality given that it was filmed and uploaded and everything in 2010.
Hello YouTube viewers and random Doctor Who fans. Today I'm going to be reviewing for yourselves the Doctor Who 11th Doctor Sonic Screwdriver.
But after Stephen published this video, it did get a little bit of traction. It started to be shared around the Doctor Who community and he got pretty good feedback. And after seeing this reaction that he got, Stephen was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And Stephen decided that he was going to dedicate a lot of his time to his YouTube channel. And he really did. He dedicated a lot of time to YouTube because he uploaded videos for years and years. And Stephen has often been described as a YouTuber.
Sonic Screwdriver? What are you going to do with that, eh?
Yeah, it's just a Sonic screwdriver.
I can show
I'll tell you
you
what, it's very, very...
shining, shimmering, splendid. Tell me, Kitty, now when did you last let your tears? I can open your eyes, take you wonder by wonder, or sideways and under on a magic carpet ride. A whole new world, a new fantastic point of view. say we're only dreaming. Now I'm in a hole. Honey, what is it? Now I'm in a hole. You guys are funny.
Yes. So if you check the link in the description or even in the comment section, because why not pop in the comment section, there will be a link to my official eBay channel where you can bid and buy some of the stuff that I have in this collection.
And he would do a lot of things on his YouTube channel. He would review sci-fi and fantasy TV shows, movies. He would review collectibles. He would unbox toys and show his audience how they worked. He would give his honest opinion on whether they should get it or not. And Stephen had an entire room dedicated to his collectibles. And he loved showing them off. He loved talking about them. And his most popular video was actually about Toy Story, where he was showing off his 2 figurines of Buzz and Woody. And that video actually got over 1 million views, which is obviously a lot of views. That is very hard to do on YouTube. He even had his own series where he would make modifications on these figurines and toys that he would unbox and make them better. And again, this goes back to his childhood. In his childhood, he loved to build toys. And now that's essentially what he's doing on YouTube. And he built up a very loyal niche audience.
1,000 subscribers video, which is absolutely awesome. So insane.
And he had 30,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is a lot of subscribers. He had a very loyal, dedicated audience. So he was an actual YouTuber. He wasn't just somebody that uploaded every now and again and only had a handful of views. No, he was an actual YouTuber with a dedicated audience of 30,000 subscribers, and some of his videos were getting a lot of views. And as time went on, he started to branch out a little bit on his content. He started to include more gaming content. He also started doing the live streaming. He started uploading vlogs about his personal life. He started opening up more. And he also started to make these random skits, which I've got to say, given his acting skills, they weren't the best. They were supposed to be like comedy. He would include his parents in these skits as well. And yeah, his content was just a range of things, basically. And as his popularity grew, he started to go to various different events. He made a lot of content of himself dressing up, doing cosplay, and he attended Comic-Con a lot, which obviously made sense with what he enjoyed and what his content was all about. And when he was at Comic-Con, Stephen actually started to interview pretty famous people, which included the American actor Ernie Hudson, who played Winston in the original Ghostbusters.
First of all, when did you discover the Fountain of Youth? Because honestly, every single year that goes by, you get younger and younger. Honestly, looking at you right now, you may as well have just stepped off the set of Ghostbusters 2.
You know, I appreciate that because I'm not feeling that. I'm sitting there, oh my God. It's a long day. I gotta go lay down. I need a nap.
And given that Stephen is such a huge Ghostbusters fan, that must have been a very surreal moment to interview someone that you idolize. Not many people actually get to do that. He also started making appearances on TV. Something that I actually found pretty fascinating is that he was on Robot Wars. He was a part of a team on Robot Wars. And I was like, what the hell? I used to watch Robot Wars. Like, I didn't watch Robot Wars when he was on a team on Robot Wars, but I used to watch that show, and he was a member of a team on Robot Wars for a while. So, yeah, things are going very well for Stephen. And while Stephen is growing his YouTube channel, he is still living at home with his parents. He's currently in his early 20s. He's now finished university, and he had a few odd jobs outside of YouTube because I think he was making money from YouTube, but again, it was very early days. People weren't really making that much, if anything, from YouTube, so he still did have a few odd jobs jobs outside of YouTube. He did voiceovers for various different companies. He also hosted a podcast. But apart from those odd little jobs,
Let me join you, mate.
Stephen didn't really seem to leave the house a lot. He was still described as a loner. He didn't really seem to have many friends. But again, this did not seem to bother Stephen. He liked his life, he liked what he did, and he was also very close with his parents. Like I said, he included his parents in some of his content on his channel, and he would also talk a lot about his parents on his channel as well. You could tell that he was genuinely friends with his parents. He liked to be around them. But then in 2014, tragedy struck, because this is when Stephen's mom suddenly passed away. And Stephen was absolutely devastated about this. He was only 24 years old when this happened, and he just really struggled to come to terms with this, to deal with this. But that was not the only tragedy that happened, because just a year later in 2015, Stephen's dad also passed away, which absolutely crushed Stephen. His life has literally been turned upside down. Just a year ago, he was living with both parents, everyone was happy, and now all of a sudden, a year later, both of his parents have passed away, and now he's living in his childhood home on his own, which must have been an incredibly surreal and weird situation to be in his childhood home without his parents. And now he's living on his own for the very first time in his life. And Stephen started to really struggle with his mental health. He did actually get a dog to help him through this grief, a little terrier called Smokey. He also continued to upload content on YouTube. I think he was using this as a creative outlet just to kind of distract himself, but none of it really helped in the end. Stephen was really, really struggling, and his life just started to go downhill. And it was in 2015, not long after his dad passed away, that Stephen actually got his first girlfriend. And we don't know the name of this woman. It hasn't been released publicly. So for the sake of this video, I'm just going to call her Jane. So Stephen's relationship with Jane, was it a good one? No. We will go on to see now that Stephen is not a very nice person. And the evidence was always there, going right back to that short film that he did when he was at university. However, initially, in the beginning of the relationship, things were really, really good, because, you know, that's how it goes with narcissists. Stephen and Jane seemed to really get along. They spent a lot of time together. Jane would go to all of the events that Stephen liked to attend. Stephen also started to hang out with more friends. He seemed to be leaving the house more. And judging from his Instagram page, Stephen seemed to be doing pretty well in life. Despite all of the trauma that he had been going through, he wasn't living such an isolated life anymore. He was hanging out with friends more, filming a lot of prank videos, hosting podcasts, doing cosplay. There is a lot of images of him and his dog Smokey. And things go on like this for a couple of years, and eventually Stephen and Jane get engaged. So yeah, it all seems like it's going pretty well. Like I said, it wasn't. Not behind closed doors, because Stephen was really struggling with his mental health. But not just that, Jane also really struggled with her mental health. And because of this, their relationship, it did become quite volatile at times. They were constantly arguing, always breaking up. They were very on and off again. And it was also around this time when Stephen, he started to develop a very manipulative personality. And to be honest, he probably always had that. It was just around now that it started to show. Because Stephen had a friend called Anne who has later come forward to actually talk about Stephen and his personality. And she said Stephen had two personalities. There was the Stephen that the world saw, who was very bubbly, charming, smiley, friendly. However, inside, there was a much darker person, because Anne has said that Stephen, he was a narcissist. He was very self-absorbed. He was in love with himself. He was very good at controlling his image. And the happy, bubbly, friendly side of Stephen was just his mask, because inside he was very manipulative, aggressive, and very controlling. And Anne has also said that he is very cold, and he's very calculated, and he likes to be in control of every situation. And he could flip in an instant. He could turn into what people called Psycho Stephen. There was even one time when he was in one of these rages that Stephen tried to drown his dog Smokey in a hot tub. And I'm like, what kind of monster does that? If you looked at his Instagram, he's like such a dog person. He loves his dog. And then in another instant, he's trying to drown his dog in a hot tub. God, no. So, as you can imagine, in the relationship between Stephen and Jane, initially Stephen was the friendly, bubbly, happy guy, the best boyfriend in the world. But then, because he's a narcissist, his mask slowly started to slip as the relationship progressed. Over time, Jane started to see Stephen's true colours, and he was very manipulative. So we now get to 2019. This is when Stephen is 29 years old, and this is when the relationship really comes to a head. Because it was around this time when Jane and Stephen, they were on a break from their relationship. So they were not together. Want to stress that they were not together. However, they do get back together. And when they are back together, Stephen starts to go through Jane's phone, which was something that he always did. It was one of his controlling tactics. And as he was going through Jane's phone, he came across photos and messages that Jane had sent to another man. And Stephen absolutely lost it. He immediately slammed his fist into the bed and he started saying, "Why would you do this to me? I thought you loved me. What are you doing?" And the couple now continued to argue for the next 24 hours. Jane kept apologizing profusely, but she also kept saying, "Stephen, I haven't done anything wrong. We were not together." And then Stephen, for some reason, he actually admitted, whilst they were arguing, Stephen admitted that he had also gone to other women for sex when they were on a break. However, it was different for Stephen. Yeah, it was different for him because in Stephen's situation,
Yeah, I was just going to say, oh, Curry, I don't know if that's a bad thing. Being able to sit in your own thoughts and your own company. Do you always smoke alone? Can you not? Do you have to be in social settings all the time to distract yourself from whatever it is that you're not wanting to face inside your own head or emotional state? What's up? I'm an ambivert. I love people until they're assholes. And I'm very content in my own space. But no, not always. I wouldn't go around people around here though, for a few reasons. I've had locals trying to kill me, and then subsequently, if not kill me, then drug me, and then also that for bad reasons. If not to sexually assault, then to kill me. I'm not playing that game. Hell no. So I hang out with my people here. And a number of these people, I'd sit in a campfire and smoke with, yeah. But can you not be alone?
He never actually went through with it. He decided that he couldn't have sex with other women because he was so in love with Jane. And that's what makes it different for Stephen. And I'm like, wow. No. Let's get this straight. Stephen only didn't sleep with other women because those other women didn't want to have sex with him. I guarantee you, if he found other women that were willing and wanting to have sex with him, he would have. But Stephen, being the narcissist, being very controlling and manipulative, was trying to make Jane feel incredibly guilty for doing something that Stephen himself had actually tried to do. So Stephen, as punishment, actually told Jane that he was going to share these messages with the world to humiliate her. He also threatened to burn all of Jane's personal possessions again as punishment. And throughout the 24 hours when they were arguing, Stephen was just getting more and more aggressive, more angry. And when Jane tried to comfort him, which I'm just like, oh my God, she's comforting him? It should be the other way around. Yes, Jane tried to comfort him, and in response, Stephen just threw her to the ground and told her to get the F out of his house. But then Stephen dragged Jane outside. He threw her into his car, and he started driving Jane to the home of the man that she had been messaging. And Stephen started shouting at her, saying, well, if you're talking to him, if you want him as much as you said, I'll bring you there right now. And Jane begged Stephen to stop. She begged Stephen to take her home. She kept apologizing. She was trapped in this car. She was still in her pajamas. She didn't know what to do. She was very overwhelmed and she started to panic. And in that moment, Jane had the urge to take her own life. That is what Stephen drove her to. And in that moment, Stephen is driving the car, currently at 50 miles an hour. Jane unbuckled her seatbelt. She told Stephen, I don't want to live anymore. She opened the car door and she tried to throw herself out of the moving car. Stephen slammed on the brakes, grabbed Jane, pulled her back in the car, and instead of, in that moment, realizing, oh my God, what have I done? What have I driven my fiance to? Because you got to remember they're engaged. Remember that. He should have thought, oh my God, I love this woman. What have I done? How have I driven her to the edge where she wants to jump out of a moving car? No, that was not his response. He actually just started slapping her and punching her in the head. It's unbelievable that he's actually just started to punch her because of what he's done. And he then starts shouting at Jane, if you want to end your life, you can do that on your own time. He then also said, quote, I don't want this to become a murder car. And I just can't believe it. I can't believe this man. And again, this is so chilling given what he goes on to do. And after this terrifying incident, Stephen did finally pull over. Jane immediately called the police. She made a statement detailing everything that happened. However, Jane quickly withdrew her statement because she didn't want Stephen to get in trouble. Things went back to normal between them. And I just can't believe that is what Stephen did. He is such a manipulative, narcissistic abuser. It makes me sick. And we now get to 2020. Stephen is now 30 years old and the world enters lockdown. And Stephen spent a lot of time in his parents' house on his own. His relationship with Jane was on a break again, and Stephen became very isolated and withdrew from society. He stopped looking after himself. He started eating very unhealthy food. He just wasn't taking care of himself at all. He still continued to post videos on YouTube though. This was his one true passion, something that he was always fully committed to. And then in 2020, during lockdown, he actually did get himself another job. He started working for the Belfast Telegraph, which was a local newspaper, and Stephen was going to be a part of the website team. His job was basically to upload the articles and publish them that other people had written. And initially, people described Stephen as really friendly, because you know that was the mask that he always wore when he first met people. But slowly over time, Stephen started to isolate himself more and more from his work colleagues. When lockdown lifted and he eventually did start going into the office, he started to spend more and more time in his car. Like on his break, he would not interact with anybody. He would just be in his car, sometimes watching YouTube, sometimes smoking, just not really socializing with anyone. He dropped his mask. He was no longer this friendly guy that people worked with, and his work started to deteriorate. He was no longer good at his job. He was just being lazy. And when anyone tried to confront him about his laziness and that he needed to step it up and do a good job, he would just get really confrontational. He was just aggressive and defensive, and it's like, you're not doing your job properly. And people at work started to talk about him, saying that his attitude was just awful, that people didn't want to be around him, that he was impossible to communicate with. People actually complained about him to their managers, and he just point blank refused to socialize with anyone from work. He would never go to work events. He wouldn't attend Christmas parties. No one had his phone number, and he was just there, doing the bare minimum, being lazy. And I honestly don't understand why he wasn't fired, because out of nowhere, he just resigns. And I'm like, you're lucky that you weren't fired. So then we get to 2022. At this point, Stephen now gets back with his ex-girlfriend / ex-fiance, Jane. Yeah, it's very confusing. I don't know if they're still engaged. I don't know if that engagement carries over to when they get back together, but whatever. Stephen is back with Jane, and within a few weeks of them getting back together,
Jane actually finds out that she's pregnant. And yes, Stephen is the father. However, almost immediately after finding out she was pregnant, Jane started having pain in her kidneys. She was rushed to hospital, and it was here that she found out that she had actually miscarried, which is just so heartbreaking that she had to go through that. And Jane, understandably, really struggled with this. In the aftermath of the miscarriage, herself and Stephen, they did go to counselling together. And for some strange reason, during these counselling sessions, Stephen secretly recorded them. And I don't know why. Was he planning on using these recordings at a later date? I don't know. It's just another one of his narcissistic controlling traits. And it's just disgusting to record somebody without their knowledge, especially given the topics that Jane would have been talking about. And she would have been so vulnerable in those sessions. It's just disgusting. But because of all of the issues they were having, and after the miscarriage, they could just never quite repair their relationship. So 6 months later, in July of 2022, this is when Jane and Stephen now break up for good, which I am so happy that Jane finally got out of that relationship with that narcissistic abuser. But the end of the relationship didn't actually seem to bother Stephen one little bit, because just 2 weeks later, Stephen downloaded a dating app and he soon met a new woman, a woman by the name of Natalie McNally. And Natalie sadly had no idea what she was getting herself into, because we are now quickly approaching the devastating events of today's case. So who is Natalie? Natalie was born on the 27th of October 1990, making her 31 years old at this point. And Natalie has been described as just the most amazing person you could ever meet. She came from a very large family who she was very close with. She was the only daughter, and she had 3 brothers, and she was just described as the princess of the family. She loved reading, she loved writing, she loved animals, she had multiple cats and a dog, and in her spare time she also campaigned for animal rights. So if she knew how Stephen treated his own dog, I guarantee you she would not be with him. But obviously Stephen has on his mask of, I'm this really charming, happy, friendly guy. And Natalie, when she was 2 years old, she was also diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And this absolutely broke Natalie's parents, because they were so sad that Natalie was going to have to live with this for the rest of her life. And as a result of this, she had to inject herself 3 to 4 times every single day. But Natalie, she just got on with it. She took everything in her stride. And after finishing school, she went on to university to study law before eventually switching to a marketing degree. She then went on to work for a company called Translink, which is the public service transport in Northern Ireland. And Natalie worked in the marketing department. And she also spent a lot of her spare time volunteering. She would volunteer to look after other people's animals. And she also campaigned for better facilities and services in her local area for those with diabetes. And absolutely no one ever had a bad word to say about Natalie. She truly was an incredible person. And it was in August of 2022 when Natalie decided to download the dating app Bumble and try and find somebody. Up until this point, Natalie had been in a few different relationships, but she was now looking for something new, and this is when she was contacted by Stephen. And Stephen and Natalie, they start messaging back and forth. And remember, this is only 2 weeks after Stephen broke up with Jane. It's crazy. He's definitely moving on quick. But Stephen and Natalie, they are now messaging back and forth, and they seem to hit it off pretty much instantly. And the pair discussed their very first date, which was going to be just a few days later. And then there was many more dates after that. And then, out of nowhere, just a little over 2 months after they first met on the 12th of October 2022, Natalie finds out that she's pregnant. And yes, Stephen is the father. And this must have come as a complete shock to Natalie. I mean, Natalie and Stephen, they were only dating casually at this point, and all of a sudden she's pregnant. Now, the first thing that she did was she told Stephen. And again, considering they had only been dating casually for a short period of time, this must have been something that she was pretty anxious about. But Stephen was apparently over the moon. He was so happy that Natalie was pregnant. And it's just crazy that just a few months prior to this, Jane was pregnant with his child. And I'm like, it's crazy. And we have no idea if Natalie knew about this or not. I'm verging on the opinion that she didn't, just because Stephen
is a narcissist. Like, why would he tell Natalie about Jane, about everything that went on with her, about how he basically abused her and controlled her and was very manipulative? Yeah, I don't think Natalie knew anything about Jane. Also, they only split up 2 weeks before Stephen started dating Natalie, so yeah, I don't think Natalie knew about Jane. And given that Stephen and Natalie have only been dating for approximately 2 months at this point, I assume that Stephen's mask is still fully on right now. Natalie hasn't seen Stephen's true colours yet. So Natalie went on and told the rest of her family that she was having a child, and Natalie's family again were over the moon for her. The family was so excited. They also had never seen Natalie this happy before. It seemed like Natalie was genuinely happy about this. She really wanted this child. Stephen also fully committed to the pregnancy. He fully supported Natalie and was going to be with her every step of the way. He told Natalie that, seeing as she's pregnant and she can't drink alcohol, he was in this with her. So he wasn't going to drink alcohol either. Like, he was going to support her in every way he could. And Stephen and Natalie was so happy right now, but sadly that would not last. Because over the next few weeks, Stephen starts to show his darker side. Stephen started to become colder towards Natalie, more aggressive. The pair started arguing more. And remember, Natalie is only a few weeks into her pregnancy. What must be going through her head? And she started to struggle with this because this was the man that she was having a child with. He was going to be in her life for the rest of her life and her child's life. And he was turning out to not be who she thought he was. So what did Natalie do? Well, she turned to her ex-boyfriend. We don't know the ex-boyfriend's name, so I'm just going to call him John. So Natalie and John, they themselves had a very complicated and long history. John himself has said that he wasn't the best boyfriend to Natalie, and at times he could also be abusive. But Natalie was still close with John, and John has said that he still cared about Natalie and would do anything for her. So by the time we get to December of 2022, Natalie and Stephen are arguing a lot. Natalie turns to her ex-boyfriend John and starts questioning everything and starts saying to her ex-boyfriend John that she might break up with Stephen. She told John that she was no longer happy with Stephen and that she was not going to stay in a relationship with Stephen and play happy families if it was not right. She said, quote, "There is no point in acting like happy families if it's not what I want. I like my independence, so right now I'm doing my own thing. I am not rushing into this family setup if it's not what I want." In another message, she said, quote, "I wouldn't do it before Christmas. That would be mean. I will see how I will feel in the new year. I'll make no rash decisions." And after receiving these messages from Natalie, John starts replying. And John starts to say, well, maybe Natalie should get back with him and not be with Stephen. So yes, this is turning into quite a messy little love triangle situation because now Natalie and John start sharing some pretty intimate messages between the two of them, very sexually charged messages. It did kind of seem like Natalie and John were rekindling their relationship. But what happens next? We all know how controlling Stephen is and everything. Somehow Stephen had managed to figure out Natalie's password for her phone and he found all of the messages. He found all of the sexually charged messages. And let's just say Stephen was not happy. But Stephen does not react in the right way. Because instead of confronting Natalie, maybe having an adult conversation about the future, considering they are having a child together, Stephen decided that no, he was not going to do that. He was going to plot his revenge in a very cold and calculated way. And things now take a devastating turn from this moment because Stephen's form of revenge was that he wanted to murder his girlfriend Natalie. But not just that, his pregnant girlfriend Natalie. So he would also be murdering his unborn child, which I can't even wrap my head around. Like, why is that the decision that he jumps to? Like, why has he decided to murder Natalie? But Stephen was determined to carry out this murder, and he was determined to get away with it. And Stephen realized that he would need an alibi. And what did Stephen decide his alibi was going to be? Well, he decided that his alibi was going to be a YouTube live stream, because in his mind, that was the perfect alibi. If he was at home live streaming, how could he have possibly gone out and murdered his girlfriend? And I didn't actually realise this before researching this case, because I've never actually thought about this before. But when I came across this case, I thought to myself, how is Stephen going to pretend to live stream? You know, you're live streaming, so you're live, you're there. Because I was always under the impression that a live stream was always live. But no, it turns out that that's not the case. You can actually upload to YouTube a pre-recorded video and make it look like a live stream. I had no idea you could do this. And you actually can't do this directly through YouTube. You need third-party software to be able to do this. And I'm not very good with technology because I am 80 years old. But just know that you can do this. And that just makes me question every live stream I've ever seen. I just didn't know you could do that. But Stephen did. Stephen knew how to do this. He knew what software he needed, and he was going to pre-record a live stream and upload that pre-recorded video as a live stream to YouTube. And he recorded this video on the 14th of December 2022. And he put so much effort into this whole thing. He actually did sit there for 6 hours gaming. And this was going to be the live stream that he uploaded. And after Stephen recorded this 6-hour pre-recorded live stream, this is when he put his absolutely devastating plan into action, because we now get to 4 days later on the 18th of December 2022, and this was a pretty significant day because it was the Football World Cup final, and Natalie was a huge football fan, so she was planning on watching this. She was planning on watching it with her family and not with Stephen. I should point out right now that Natalie and Stephen, they do not live together. So Natalie was planning on watching the football game with her family, and Stephen was going to stay at home. So Natalie arrived at her parents' home at 3 p.m. just before kickoff. She watched the football game at her parents' house before heading back to her home at just before 6 p.m. And at just before 6 p.m., it was actually 5:57 to be exact, Stephen would send Natalie a message that would change everything. Because Stephen texted, quote, "Hi Nat, off to stream the night away. Wish me luck." And Natalie replied, "Good luck. I might have a peek at your live stream later." So Stephen literally told Natalie that he was going to be live streaming. But what Natalie didn't realise is that something far more sinister was about to happen. Because at 6 p.m. that evening, just like Stephen said to Natalie, Stephen's live stream started. At least it appeared that it was a live stream, but as we know, it was a pre-recorded video. And you can see some of this video footage online still to this day. You can see Stephen introducing himself, and he says, "Hey, hi everyone, we're live." But of course, the video is not live at all.
Hey, and we're live. Hello, everyone. Yeah, a little bit out of the blue, this, isn't it? A little bit better framed, but that's the fun of being live. Yes, so hello to all in this glorious Sunday evening. Yeah, so I just thought, why not? I'm gonna do a live stream because this day next week is Christmas. So what more could you want for Christmas other than an evening with your own pal Stephen?
And throughout the pre-recorded video, Stephen really did try his best to make it appear like it was live. So he would say comments like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't reply to any comments right now. There's like a glitch in the software. Just talk amongst yourselves."
Well, because this streaming software is kind of up the left, it means I can't check the live chat, which is a real shame. So, by all means, talk amongst yourselves. I could use my phone to dip in every now and again and check it, but I've decided that I kind of hate live streams where people just sit and read comments and go, "Oh my God, yes, ask me questions."
Of course, we know that he wasn't able to interact with the live chat because he wasn't live. But people watching the live stream didn't realise that. They just genuinely believed that he was having software issues and he couldn't respond to anybody.
By the way, I'm not leaving the house tonight, so yeah.
And throughout this live stream, Stephen was playing Grand Theft Auto, and it's so chilling. It really, really is. Because throughout the whole of this 6-hour live stream, and he's playing Grand Theft Auto, the whole time he is on a mission to kill a woman. He spends the whole game hunting a woman down, and Stephen is really into this. He starts shouting at the camera, "I need to kill this bitch. I need to take her down. Time is of the essence. I nearly got the bitch."
Get that fucking scared. Are you serious? To kill this bitch. I need to take her down. Aha! Lovely.
And knowing what Stephen wants to do, especially what he wants to do during this live stream to Natalie, I have no words. And throughout the whole live stream, Stephen kept taking breaks and he kept putting up a screensaver. And the screensaver was a James Bond movie poster of No Time to Die, which again, very chilling. He also says things in the live stream like, I actually think it will be a really effing good Christmas this year.
I actually think it'll be a really fucking good Christmas this year.
I can't believe he's saying this. And he also said, my efforts shall be involved elsewhere in my life.
Trying to get back into my game again, but that's not going to be a fucking thing come next year because my efforts shall be involved elsewhere in my life.
He also references Natalie in the live stream. He says things like, "Absa effing Natalie."
Absolutely fucking Natalie.
Which I don't know what he means by that. And it's just so chilling. Like, he's making it so obvious as well. Like, he's gone through the whole effort of doing this. Why is he making it so obvious in the live stream of what he actually wants to do? And heartbreakingly, Natalie does exactly what she says she's going to do. She told Stephen that she might pop in and watch his live stream. And that's exactly what she does. Natalie had returned home from watching the World Cup final. She logs onto YouTube and she logs onto her boyfriend's live stream and starts watching, not realizing that it's not actually live. She has no idea that it's actually pre-recorded and that her boyfriend, the father of her unborn child, is currently traveling to her home to do the absolute unthinkable. Because as soon as Stephen started playing the fake live stream on YouTube, he really did put his horrific plan into action. Because he first put on a heavy overcoat, he put on a wig, he then put a beanie hat on top of the wig, he covered his mouth with a mask, wore 2 sets of gloves, and then he left the house. And Stephen thought he was being really clever about this. He thought that he would never get caught and he was wearing a disguise. So no one would be able to recognize him anyway if he was caught on any cameras. At 6:36 p.m, you can see Stephen in his disguise leaving his home. You can see him walking down the road. He also decided not to drive because he didn't want any cameras picking up his license plate. So instead, he decided to take the bus to Natalie's house. Again, he thought he was being really clever about this because he decided to pay for everything in cash, so there would be no trail of him being there. And then at around 8:50 p.m, as Natalie is watching Stephen's live stream, Stephen turns up outside of her home. And Stephen, somehow, we don't know, he forces his way into Natalie's home. And once Stephen was inside Natalie's home, you would really hope that he would come to his senses. Like, that's the mother of his unborn child. This is so cold and calculating. He has gone through so much effort. How is it that at no point he has changed his mind? Because he doesn't. He is on a mission and he does not change his mind, because once he is inside Natalie's home, he launches into a brutal and vicious attack on Natalie. He starts hitting her with his fists. He lands 5 heavy blows to her head. He also starts slamming her head into furniture. He causes lacerations to her scalp and he causes bleeding on the brain. And then this is when Stephen goes into the kitchen and he pulls out a large kitchen knife. And then he just starts stabbing Natalie repeatedly. He stabbed her in the neck 3 times and then he begins to strangle her. And this attack went on for quite a while, and the whole time Natalie was trying to fight back. But tragically, after such a vicious and brutal attack, Natalie couldn't fight back any longer. And this is the moment when 32-year-old Natalie McNally lost her life. But not just that, it was in that moment as well that Stephen took the life of his unborn child, which truly, truly breaks my heart. Natalie was currently 15 weeks pregnant. She had so much ahead of her. She was so happy to be pregnant and the future that she was going to have with her child. Her family had even said that they had never seen Natalie as happy as she was when she was pregnant. And Stephen very coldly took all of that away. And then after the murder, if what Stephen has done was not despicable enough, he then posed Natalie's body by putting her head in a bowl of dog food. I just have no words. Like, why? It's just to completely dehumanize her, completely humiliate her, even in death. Just completely strip her of her dignity, and it's absolutely disgusting. He then changed his clothes, and then at 9:31 p.m, 40 minutes after he first arrived, he was captured walking away from the scene of the murder. And he is just walking so calmly without a care in the world. It is truly scary just how cold and calculated this man is. And Stephen really did think that he had been so clever about all of this, that the YouTube live stream was the perfect alibi, the fact that he wore a disguise, paid for everything in cash, took the bus. However, it was now where his plan would start to fall apart, because the original plan was that he was going to catch the train home, but he had missed the last train. So Stephen could no longer take the train, and there was clearly no more buses, which meant that Stephen had to take a taxi. But again, Stephen thought that he could work around this, because he thought, well, if I order the taxi to take me to a home that is not my own, it still can't be linked to me. However, what Stephen didn't realise until after he got into the taxi was that he didn't have enough money to pay for the taxi, meaning that he had to get the taxi to drop him home so he could go inside, get money, pay for the taxi. But Stephen thought that, oh well, it's not going to be a problem. He thought that he had been so clever about everything else that he would still get away with everything. However, what Stephen didn't realise is that this decision to get a taxi and for the taxi to drop him home would actually come back to bite him, which makes me so happy. So we now get to the day after the murder, the 19th of December 2022. And Stephen got up on this day like it was any other day and pretended to be normal. He uploaded a video onto YouTube. It was a video reviewing a lightsaber toy. He started the day by sending Natalie a message, which included him saying good morning. He was pretending to be normal, and then at 5 p.m. on that day, he sent Natalie another message that said, "Are you okay?" And then 20 minutes after that message, he sent Natalie another message saying, "Getting a little worried now. Let me know you are safe." He then sent one final message at 9:07 p.m. that said he was very concerned. So again, he's trying to act normal and he's trying to play the concerned boyfriend. He then phoned his friend Anne. Remember Anne? She was the one that described him as a narcissist. And he started telling Anne that he was really worried about Natalie and that he wanted to go over to her home to check on her. And he said to Anne, can she go along with him? And why did Stephen want Anne with him? Well, he wanted a witness to him discovering Natalie's body. It's like the lengths that this man is going to is absolutely disgusting. But Anne felt like something wasn't right. I mean, she thinks that Stephen's a narcissist, so yeah. So she declined his request. So Stephen carried on to Natalie's home on his own regardless. And then at 10 p.m. he arrives at Natalie's home. He lets himself in and he dials 999. During the phone call, Stephen is apparently howling. He's inconsolable. And he says, please come as soon as you can. She's pregnant. She's cold. And when the ambulance arrives, they find Stephen apparently inconsolable. And they try and perform CPR on Natalie, but there is nothing that they can do. And the police arrive soon after, and the scene is a horror scene. There was blood everywhere, and obviously Natalie, she's lying. Her head is in a bowl of dog food. And Natalie had a dog. Her poor dog, River, was still at the scene. Oh my God, that breaks my heart. River was there. Natalie's dog was there when she was murdered, and Natalie's dog was there the whole time with Natalie's body for like a day. Oh my God, that just, no. It's just so upsetting to think about. The whole thing, and then the dog being there, and with all of the commotion going on and the fact that Natalie was murdered, River, the dog, was so scared and so terrified. The dog ran out of the home and got hit by a car. Oh God, it's too much. Thankfully, the dog survived, and the dog actually is living with Natalie's parents. The dog is fine, but oh my God. And speaking of Natalie's parents, they were informed of their daughter's murder, and they were absolutely broken because not only had they lost their daughter, but they had also lost their future grandchild. And unbelievably, when the police are there, they actually arrest Stephen right there and then, because obviously he looks guilty. Okay, he's the boyfriend, he's there at the scene. The police did not trust him one little bit, and they took him in for questioning. But of course, Stephen had the perfect alibi. So when he was taken in for questioning, the police obviously said, well, where were you? Stephen said, well, I couldn't have done this. No. I was alive.
Not Indian. White guy.
obviously said, well, where were you? Stephen said, well, I couldn't have done this. I was live streaming on YouTube. I mean, look, here is the evidence. And Stephen pulled out his phone. He showed the police his YouTube channel, showed him that he was live streaming, and the police believed it. They were like, well, yeah, well, how could he have murdered his girlfriend? He was at home live streaming. It's crazy. It's crazy that he actually worked. So the police let him go. It's insanity. And another thing that is just crazy is that before Stephen left the police station, he turned around and said to the police that they should look at Natalie's ex-boyfriend, John, because he was abusive. And it's like, wow. He's even giving them another suspect. Stephen really did think that he had gotten away with everything. And what is just truly sick is that once he was released from custody, he then played the role of grieving boyfriend and father. It makes me so angry. Stephen pretended to be so heartbroken, so hard done by. He shared posts on Instagram saying how terrible his life was. He wanted everyone around him to feel sorry for him. It makes me sick. But this is just typical narcissistic behavior, isn't it? He spent a ton of time grieving with Natalie's parents as well, which is just completely sick. Stephen would spend so much time with Natalie's parents, but he did have an ulterior motive for spending so much time with Natalie's parents, and that is because he wanted to stay close to the investigation. There was even one time when Stephen left a recording device in Natalie's parents' home because he wanted to listen in on Natalie's parents, you know, to see if they were suspicious of him or anything. But it's just so sick that he played the heartbroken boyfriend to Natalie's parents. He even showed them an engagement ring because he said that he was planning on proposing to Natalie, which he clearly wasn't. But things would soon start catching up to Stephen. Oh yes, because the police were now closing in on him. Yes, they had spent
And I don't understand how there are people who are detached from empathy. It really doesn't compute in my brain. Okay, pause right there. That is because that sounds like an empath statement. Because for an empath, we can't imagine treating people the way that they've tried to treat us or other people. We can't imagine just going about doing that and at all, let alone not feeling any kind of guilt or remorse for it. But on the flip side, people who do that, it's in reverse. They can't understand like how and why we care. They think that, you know, sensitivity is a weakness, but they don't understand that the thing that intimidates them about us is that we can read them. It's because of that sensitivity. You can understand, though, on the flip side, and it's different as an empath, how they can't feel anything because you do on a neurophysiological level. You have something called mirror neurons. And like, let's say you as an empath come across somebody who's grieving over something and you feel just sad for them, that they're so sad. That's because your brain is mirroring, it's like firing neurons back and forth to match the neuron frequency, basically, the state of emotion that they're feeling. But the people who don't feel bad about any of these things, hurting people, what have you, they don't have mirror neurons that function the way that ours do. They don't have them. So they don't have the parts of their brain active and functioning or at all in order to process those things. They're not very evolved creatures.
hours and hours going through CCTV footage, they found a man who had entered Natalie.
Yes, but on the flip side, could be a twisted form of empathy. They want to witness and see a pain in others to release their own pains. But that's not really empathy. That's sadism. They take pleasure in other people's pain. And that's the thing is, when you have people like that who are getting a pleasure out of causing pain or joy out of seeing someone else that's suffering on some level, that person it's not even about like releasing their own pains. They're getting a serotonin boost. They get happy. Or a dopamine boost, both. Pleasure center hit. When they hurt people, it makes them feel good. And that's not empathy. There's a deficiency, I would say.
In a disguise, they traced his journey across Northern Ireland backwards, and they eventually found that the killer had started their journey from the road Stephen lived on. And then it wasn't long after that that the police realised that the suspect had been dropped off by taxi to Stephen's home. So the police found the taxi driver.
Because here you are on the flip side, still trying to find like some sort of like rationality, maybe empathy, like trying maybe to understand or give a little bit of grace, which is a very empath type of thing to do on some level. But they don't do that, right? They don't give people grace. They target people, and the only time they support people is if it benefits them, or if those people are against someone that they're also against. So it's not really that they're even connected to those people. They just have mutual hatred for someone else, mutual obsession over someone else. It's just not the same. Like, we understand where they're coming from, but they don't understand where we're coming from. We're not the same.
To testify, and the taxi driver described the passenger, and the description perfectly matched Stephen. So yeah, I told you that taxi journey would come back to bite him, and that's actually just really scary, because if Stephen did manage to catch that last train, would he have been able to get away with it? I'm still going to say no, but it's scary to think about that he might have. So the taxi driver identifying Stephen was enough for a warrant. So the police seized all of Stephen's devices. They seized his phone, and they realised that his phone was turned off the entire time that the murder had taken place, which was suspicious. But even more shockingly, when the police went through Stephen's laptop, they realised that the live stream on YouTube was not actually live. They found the pre-recorded video. So Stephen wasn't actually live streaming, and this was obviously his alibi, which meant that Stephen didn't have an alibi. And this was now enough for the police to arrest Stephen for a second time. And this was at the end of January 2023, over a month after the murder of Natalie. So Stephen had gotten away with this for quite a while. However, as soon as Stephen was arrested and taken in for an interview, he was charged with murder. And he was held in custody awaiting trial, thank God. And this is when the news of what Stephen had done had gone public. And people were so shocked that this YouTuber had committed a murder whilst apparently live streaming. People made videos about the fact that Stephen was their favourite YouTuber and he turned out to be a murderer. Can you even imagine that? Can you imagine your favourite YouTuber turns out to be a murderer? And the legal process dragged on for 3 years. Natalie's family must have been going through so much torment, waiting for Stephen to go to trial. And the trial finally started at the beginning of this year, in February of 2026, 3 years after he was arrested and charged with murder. It's truly ridiculous sometimes how long the criminal justice system takes. And it was definitely a hard case to prosecute because Stephen, he was quite clever about a lot of things. He had covered his tracks very well because he had worn gloves. There was no fingerprints at the scene. There was no DNA. He had also disposed of all of the clothing that he had worn that night, and that clothing was never found. However, what they did find was fingerprints from a particular marigold glove. And when they looked at the CCTV footage, Stephen was wearing these exact marigold gloves. So that was definitely a strike. They also had all of the CCTV footage linking the killer back to Stephen's road and then Stephen's home. And then they also had a lot of witnesses come forward, character witnesses coming forward, like Stephen's ex-girlfriend coming forward to testify about how aggressive he was, abusive, manipulative. They also had the text between Natalie and her ex-boyfriend as motive for Stephen. And in the end, Stephen didn't put up much of a defense. He didn't take the stand. And after 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Stephen guilty. And Stephen was sentenced to life in prison, which was an automatic sentence after he was found guilty of murder. However, Stephen may be eligible for parole, but this will not be determined until a second sentencing hearing that is happening sometime in May. But who knows? It might not even happen in May. So he may be eligible for parole, but I just don't know. But he's been found guilty of murder, and hopefully he is going to spend a very long time in prison.
Well, good. Palate cleanser. I don't know if we watched this one.
One of the finest passenger steamers on the Atlantic is in trouble, breaking apart in a violent sea. Potential rescuers are nearby, but they choose to look on, refusing to render any aid. The passengers and crew are trapped as the ship buckles and floods, desperate for help, but the locals here have other, more sinister plans. On my channel, I always love telling stories of wrecks that have been forgotten. We explore not only a physical place, but also explore a story that has faded so much that it's become uncharted all over again. This is one of those stories, but even more so. A massive ship with a sizable loss of life, gone. It's barely even in the history books. We're traveling to Marie Joseph in Nova Scotia to see if anything at all still exists from this 165-year-old disaster. Out in the channel over there, you see a very distant island. There's 2 outer islands over there, and just beyond that is a reef called Seal Ledges. And that is where the Indian has struck. This is the story of the SS Indian on Part-Time Explorer.
Yeah, make sure to feed yourself.
Marie Joseph, Nova Scotia is a quiet little hamlet along the eastern shore of the province. It's the kind of settlement that you pass through without even noticing it. I came across this disaster while researching my documentary on the wreck of the Hungarian in early 1860. Owned by the same company, the SS Indian crashed in the same part of the ocean only a few months before the Hungarian. Regular viewers of my channel will recall stories of Nova Scotia wrecks where the locals moved heaven and earth to rescue those in peril, such as with the Atlantic in 1873, or when they stood vigil through a blistering night, standing watch for anyone who might come ashore, such as with the Hungarian in 1860. But the residents here, when the Indian came ashore in 1859, were oddly indifferent. Why? The details of this wreck are unbelievably scant. Half a dozen newspaper articles exist, as well as a couple of first-hand accounts. From those, we'll do our best to piece together the details of this story. The Indian belonged to the Montreal Ocean Steamship Company, better known as the Allen Line, based out of Montreal, even though many of their ships were registered in Glasgow, Scotland. The Indian was the company's second steamship, second to her older sister, the Canadian. The Indian and the Canadian were intended to sail between Canada and England,
offering a voyage every 2 weeks as the two ships alternated back and forth. The Indian was built in 1854 by William Denny and Company in Dumbarton, Scotland, and launched on December 19th of that year. She had a gross tonnage of 1,764 and measured 277 feet in length. The Indian's early career was a busy one. As soon as she entered service, she was immediately requisitioned as a troop ship for the Crimean War, until being released in 1856 and returning to passenger service. For at least a couple of years, she was under the command of a Captain Thomas Jones, a determined...
I forget. I'll try to find it and pull it up, but I think I have an answer to that question. Death, I found some documentaries that I saved to watch later. I haven't even gone through them yet. But there was something in the title about that, like, I think it was like the Black Sea or the Dead Sea. There was some place where it was like so cold, or the mineral composition was just right, and it perfectly preserved these really ancient shipwrecks. I forget. I'll see if I can find it though. Let you know.
Sea captain who was loved by his crew and knew exactly how to get the most out of his ship. As the Allen Line's fleet expanded to include newer, bigger steamships, the older, slower Indian was seen as more of a secondary ship in the company's fleet, and yet, under Captain Thomas Jones, he was able to break company speed records using this slower ship in 1857. His crew wanted to celebrate this triumph and commissioned a golden pocket watch, presenting it as a gift for him with an inscription commemorating the achievement. In 1858, the ship transported a detachment of the 100th Regiment from Canada to England. This was the first corps of soldiers ever raised up in a British colony and sent back to England for regular military service, and yet the reception in Liverpool when they arrived was a cold one. Later that year, a new class of ships were introduced to the Allen Line, the Nova Scotia class, consisting of the Nova Scotian, the North Briton, the Hungarian, and the Bohemian. With them, the Indian's skilled captain, Captain Thomas Jones, was transferred to the brand new Hungarian, and the Indian's new captain was Captain William Smith. He was a skilled sea captain, but little more is known about him. It was now November 1859. The Indian was making preparations to depart from Liverpool across the Atlantic. During the winter months, the Allen Line steamers avoided the colder climate and the ice to the north by steaming along a more southerly route. Rather than sailing into Quebec, they actually steamed into Portland, Maine. This voyage would be the first crossing of this winter season along that southerly route. November 9th, with the midday high tide, the Indian departed the landing stage in Liverpool, steaming across the bar of the river.
Portland's like on the other side, basically, but yeah, it's in the state.
And stopping in Queenstown, Ireland, to pick up more passengers, baggage, and mail. On board the Indian are 38 passengers, 8 in saloon class, or first class, and 30 in steerage, mostly large families from Hungary and Germany. For this voyage, the crew of the Indian consists of about 100 men. Additionally, there were 300 tons of cargo and 800 tons of coal. The voyage across the Atlantic was mostly uneventful. The first few days of the crossing were windy with light rain, followed by heavy fog for the following few days. One thing of note that was actually recorded was a steerage passenger, an Irishman whose name seems to be lost. He likely boarded in Queenstown and now was suffering from fits of delirium and was not well. Nearly on a daily basis, he would pack up all of his belongings and try to bribe the crew to drop him off at the nearest shore. He insisted that the Indian would never reach Portland, and he would not survive this voyage. The Indian was 10 days out of Liverpool when Captain Smith believed her to be approaching North America and had his crew begin taking soundings every hour. It's pretty straightforward. Essentially, a crewman throws a line overboard with a weight on the end, and that weight sinks down until it hits the sea floor. The crew, still holding on to the other end of the rope, are able to measure the ocean's depth by measuring that rope.
Hi, Leonardo. How are you?
As time goes on and more soundings are taken, the captain and his officers will consult their navigational charts, which list off the depths. They'll have a rough idea as to where they are, and then they'll look for a pattern in these numbers that matches the soundings that they've been taking. Okay, so we've measured 15 fathoms here, and then after 10 miles of steaming, we're measuring 16 fathoms, and then after another 10 miles, here is 20 fathoms. With more measurements over time, even without being able to see around you, they'll be able to know roughly where they are on the chart, and therefore where they are in the sea. Captain Smith believed he was just south of Cape Race, and sure enough, when the fog cleared, there was Cape Race. They were 18 miles to the south. From there, Smith put the ship on a course to continue on to Nova Scotia. Haze and fog fell once more the following day, and land was no longer visible. The ship was steaming at around 11 knots, and by noon on the following day, the captain believed that he would be in the vicinity of the Bunkero Bank to the southeast of Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. According to the chart, if that were the case, the depth there should be around 40 fathoms. Well, throughout the early afternoon, the crew took 4 different depth measurements and found the depth there to range between 30 and 43 fathoms, which solidified the captain's belief in their location and actually meant that they were drifting a little too far to the south towards the dreaded Sable Island. Not to be confused with Cape Sable Island, where the drama of the wreck of the Hungarian would take place only a couple of months later. Sable Island is a long island of sand 100 miles off of Nova Scotia, notorious for wrecking countless ships over the centuries. But it was no real big deal. According to the charts, they were still miles and miles off of the island. Still, the captain corrected the course and steered to the north away from the island. Here's where everything went wrong. The soundings that the captain took did correspond with the depths around Sable Island, but that wasn't the only area on his nautical chart where those depths would have matched. The Indian was actually significantly north of Sable Island, closer to the Nova Scotian mainland, in an area with very similar depth soundings. Now, incorrectly fixing this position may have been the captain's own error, but he was not alone in his misjudgment. He showed the results of the soundings to his crew and explained where he believes they were on the charts, and they agreed with him. In fact, it's perfectly reasonable to believe that you were in that water if you were presented with the same evidence, but he was sadly mistaken. At 4 a.m. on the 21st, the captain, confident in their position, left the ship in the hands of Chief Officer James Stewart, and then he went to lie down. Chief Officer Stewart ordered the ship to travel at full speed, believing that there was plenty of open ocean ahead of them, and even ordered the aftermost sails be raised to boost the ship's speed even further. They believed that they had dozens of miles of open ocean ahead of them, but this just wasn't the case. Less than an hour later, through the fog, the crew thought that they had seen land just off the starboard side, but they weren't sure. If they did, it was probably that island over there. Playing it safe, the chief officer altered course slightly to the south, but this wasn't enough. Shortly after 5 o'clock, with the captain lying down and the chief officer on watch, the SS Indian struck seal ledges just off of Barren Island, just over my shoulder. The ship was stuck on the rocks and flooding fast. The Indian was in a terrible situation, one that was all too common on the rocks of Nova Scotia in the latter half of the 1800s. The SS Atlantic of the White Star Line was wrecked like this in 1873 with a loss of around 550 people. The Allen liner Hungarian, a running mate to the Indian, would end up like this only a couple months later. In both cases, the loss of life was appalling. Now here was the Indian, in treacherous seas with waves breaking against her hull. Captain Smith rushed onto the deck and began giving orders. Distress rockets were fired to call for the help of any nearby inhabitants. Next, the lifeboats were ready. The Indian carried 7 lifeboats, more than enough for the 138 souls on board. If the situation was handled properly, there was hope for everybody. The sea was raging, and Captain Smith deemed it safer aboard the Indian than in those small wooden boats. So he ordered the passengers stay aboard the ship and some of the crew be sent out in 2 lifeboats. The idea was that those crewmen would go ashore, find help, and come back and rescue the remainder of the people on board, including all of the passengers. And to be clear, the captain was staying behind on the ship too, to watch over them. But against his orders, steerage passengers forced their way into one of the first lifeboats to leave the ship, lifeboat number 2. While lowering, the davit collapsed, dropping the boat into the water. The breaking waves quickly capsized the boat, killing all of the occupants. A second boat, lifeboat number 1, was launched from the starboard side. It dangled on the falls just above the water, jammed there. Those aboard had shouted for people on deck to cut the falls. The falls are the ropes that the boat was hanging by. They did so, and the boat slapped down with such violence that several occupants were launched out of it, drowning them. But the boat seems to have recovered, and the few inside reached the safety of the mainland a short distance away. 2 other lifeboats were launched, at least one of them defying the captain's orders and abandoning those left behind on the ship. One of the 2 lifeboats made it to shore safely, but the other was pulled out to sea, vanishing. As daylight began to break, the ship strained and groaned with each wave. It had settled on the ledge, and the decks were all well above the surface, but the hull was beginning to flex. The bow was the high ground, and most of the people still on board, including all of the women and children, moved to the front of the ship. Near the stern of the ship, though, were the Indians' remaining lifeboats, and fearing that the ship was beginning to go, the captain ordered lifeboat number 6 to be launched. He put all of the remaining women and children into that one lifeboat. It was heaved over the side into the raging seas and successfully navigated to shore. The women and children were safe. At this point, there were still around 30 people aboard the Indian, and the lifeboats were gone. The signal cannon and distress rockets were firing up into the air. Captain Smith urgently needed assistance, but nobody was coming. Several local schooners came in close to look at the stranded ship, but none of them offered to help. In fact, Captain Smith did his best to signal them and get their attention. One of them even came in within 300 yards, close enough to plainly see the crew of the Indian on the deck, before it just sailed away. The locals appeared to be ignoring the Indian. It was now 6 a.m., nearly an hour after the ship had struck, and the hull began to buckle. Suddenly the ship split, the forward masts fell, and the bow section detached, rolling away to port, and slowly it began to settle into the sea. That was previously the ship's high point, so most of the people still on board had been congregating up there. A line was strung from the sinking forward section to the still stable after portion, and around 20 or 30 men were able to climb across this line to the safety of the stern. All but one man who refused to go. It was the old Irishman who had insisted that the ship was going to wreck. He shouted that he would never make it across the line to safety and that his time was up. The survivors on the stern shouted for him to try as the ship continued to separate, the line stretching tighter, the bow sinking ever deeper, but he refused to take his chance. Suddenly the bow gave way completely, rolling into the sea, and the Irishman was lost.
That's lovely.
The stern section was stable, and now all that those on board had to do was wait. Those remaining aboard the stern were stranded for hours, still attempting to signal for help. One schooner from Marie Joseph eventually did go out to try to help, leaving from roughly this spot and sailing out into the channel. It got caught in the breakers and wrecked. Now, the crew on board did manage to survive, but they were unable to help those aboard the Indian. It wasn't until late afternoon when 2 rescue boats from Marie Joseph were finally launched, coming out and rescuing the remaining people off of the Indian. The final death toll is hard to say. 19 is what was initially reported, 9 in steerage, including 2 women and 3 children, and 10 crew. However, the purser later reported 27 was the final count. The captain later described the loss as, quote, not that bad. Some of the survivors took shelter here in Marie Joseph, likely being taken in by some of the locals. But other survivors who landed elsewhere were exposed to the elements throughout the night, only finding civilization the next day. As the night passed, Captain Smith scoured the area trying to find people that he could hire to help him guard the wreck from looters, but he couldn't find anybody. It wasn't until the next day when he was able to hitch a ride back out to the wreck. And when he did, he found 2 schooners tied up alongside the Indian with their crew aboard the ship. They were absolutely pilfering the vessel. Now, they were showing interest in the Indian. He climbed aboard quietly and began stealthily searching through the ship. The ship had been ransacked. The ship's dishes, silverware, her cargo, and anything else of value had been neatly organized in the ship's ladies' saloon that was being offloaded onto these 2 schooners. It was all very methodical. And that's when Captain Smith realized why so many schooners came in close to look but didn't help. Like vultures, they were waiting to see if the ship had been deserted. Was everybody dead yet so they could come in and pick it clean? When they saw it wasn't, they backed off. What's more is they weren't simply taking the ship's fittings. One could argue that, okay, it's going to be destroyed soon, someone might as well have it. But they were taking the passengers' personal belongings. Most of these people were still alive on shore, but their clothes were gone. Their valuables were gone. Every suitcase was broken open and emptied. As a result of these looters, many of the survivors, particularly the steerage immigrants, were left destitute. The survivors were eventually brought down to Halifax and made their way to their destinations. Charges were filed against some of the looters, and several men were brought to trial. One man, a man named Berna, was arrested in the night, and his house was searched. They found an expensive paisley scarf that matched the description of one that was stolen from a passenger, but he said it was his wife's. He scoffed at them, asking, can a poor person not also afford a scarf like this? But upon closer inspection, it was found to be absolutely drenched with seawater, and he was brought to trial. While the location of these trials seems to be forgotten, and certainly the courthouse that they took place in is gone, the nearby museum of Sherbrooke Village has a period courthouse that gives us an idea of the building that these trials might have taken place in. He stood trial briefly, but these royal courts were no match for a case of this importance, and the jails seemed unable to contain the men who were accused. In most cases, the defendants seemed to just walk away from the trials with ease. The museum also has a jail similar to the ones that briefly contained the looters.
Right now, we're into the Sherbrooke Jail, which was opened in 1862, never closed till 1968. So, of course, this was quite a port for shipbuilding in the early days. And then, of course, the gold rush came here in 1861. And we decided we'd build the jail the next year in order to curb some of the drinking and what went along with that.
And interestingly enough, this jail has graffiti carved into it that looks like an Allen liner. On November 26th, almost a week after the disaster, some good news was reported. A schooner from Prince Edward Island arrived in Boston after having picked up survivors in a lifeboat off the coast of Nova Scotia. It was the lifeboat that had been dragged out to sea and disappeared. Inside of it were about half a dozen crewmen from the Indian, and all of them were safe. The rest of the surviving crew, also taken to Halifax with the passengers, were picked up by the Allen liner Hungarian on December 7th, 1859. The Hungarian was under the command of Captain Thomas Jones, the old record-setting captain who previously had commanded the Indian. I'm standing on the waterfront in downtown Halifax, and it's around here on December 7th, 1859, that the Hungarian steamed in, past this wharf, heading up that way to pick up the survivors from the Indian, and they picked up 6 officers and 50 sailors. The Indian's connection with the Hungarian didn't end there. The looting of the Indian and the loss of so much personal property and cargo was a scandal that tarnished the reputation of Nova Scotia. And 3 months later, when the SS Hungarian of the same company as the Indian crashed into Nova Scotia, the provincial government took extra steps to make sure that the incident didn't repeat itself. Normally, when a ship wrecks, it's the job of the ship's officers, with the help of the local authorities, to protect the wreckage from looters, not abandoning the ship per se, because if the ship is abandoned, it is up for grabs. They have to stand by it for as long as possible. But the provincial government, this time when the Hungarian wrecked, in order to avoid a repeat, they sent their own officer down to the wreckage, and they gave him jurisdiction over those local authorities. This offended the locals because they thought that it implied that they were incapable of protecting the wreck from looters. Which was right, because they got looted anyway, although not nearly as bad as the Indian. The wreck of the Indian today is long gone. It was only a week after the disaster when it was reported to have fully sunk under the waves. When it comes to forgotten shipwrecks, this is an all-time low, considering the size of the ship and the death toll. And a visit to several possible archives throughout the province yielded no results. There's nothing left to indicate that the Indian went down just over here. There's no markers, there's no plaques, there's nothing. I don't even think there's a single building left from the time of the Indian. Everything since then has been torn down and new buildings built in their place. I would love to have been able to organize an expedition to go out to the wreck site of the Indian to see if we could do a survey and find out if there are remnants of the Indian down there. But I'm told there's nothing left. It was a wooden ship, so the hull would be long gone. What might still be there are remnants of boilers or other machinery, but even that is not very likely considering all the storms tearing through there and the strong currents. The lasting legacy of this wreck is the fact that the ship was stripped of anything of value within days of the disaster, and yet I couldn't find anything. That's not to say there isn't something out there, but it's all buried away, if there is. I even did my best to hunt down artifacts that some people might have, walking up to some of the locals and just asking them, what do you know about this wreck? Do you know anything about things that were taken off of it? Some people did know of items, but they've sold them all since then, which is a shame, because I would have bought it. I can't find any graves, although there must be some somewhere. The oldest cemetery in the area is the old Smith's Cove Cemetery, along a very long dirt road that my van was ill-equipped to go down, but we did it anyway. The mosquitoes and flies were a black cloud that just swarmed me as soon as I got out of the car. But I did look around for a little bit. I checked as many graves as I could. Some of them went back to the 1860s. I couldn't find anything from the 1850s and nothing marked Indian. Marie Joseph is a quiet town today, as it has been since the time of the wreck, going about its business indifferent to the drama that unfolded here over 165 years ago. This video, I hope, shines light on the story and prevents it from slipping away beyond memory. It's worth taking a moment to point out the two old fishing boats rotting away on the Marie Joseph waterfront. This boatyard is where several boats sat rotting away, although most of the larger vessels have been cleared away already. These two wooden boats aren't particularly old, but they've been sitting out exposed to the elements and the sea air without any maintenance for almost 2 decades, and are now falling apart. They don't connect to the wreck of the Indian in any way, but they're worth looking at while we're here. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel and share the video around. Keep an eye out also for the VFX reel of these animations.
Okay, my darlings. I'm going to call it right there. In the meantime, please remember to pray. Do no harm, take no crap, and I will certainly catch you on the next one. Sweet dreams. Thanks for being here, guys. One love.